Hello friends, welcome to the Point. In this session, we are discussing about protection of wildlife and cruelty to animals. Wildlife, it is a collective term that includes animals, bees, butterfly, crustaceans, fish, moths, aquatic and land vegetation, which form a part of any habitat. It is called as a wildlife. Human beings, because of his needs and greed, had become one of the major enemies of wildlife. With the expansion of agriculture, settlement, industrial and other development activities, the number in the wild animals is gradually decreasing. As a result, several species of animals have been declared extinct and several others are on the verge of extinction. What is the need to conserve wildlife? Wildlife, it is a national resource which helps in maintaining the ecological balance and also helps with the utility from economic, recreational and aesthetic points of view. Ecological balance. Wildlife, it is important link in the food chain in terrestrial ecosystem. Every species in this chain, they help in balancing the population, maintaining the food chain and natural cycles on the earth. And all this make the environment a self-sustaining system. Every man and wildlife, they are dependent on each other in one way or the other, and they cause the disturbance in one of them and which give rise to imbalance in the other. Therefore, ways and means should be found so that the two can coexist. Economic value. Wild species, they are economically important. Some of the parts of wild animals are ecologically accepted trades like skin, horns, fur, ivory, musk, etc. They constitute an important element of commerce in many countries. Wildlife, they also provide us with a number of plants and herbs and which are utilized for medicinal purposes. Recreational and aesthetic value. Wildlife, they had made this planet aesthetically attractive. Many countries, for example Kenya and Tanzania, they have exploited their wildlife resources to develop tourism. As the tourism is increasing, the wildlife is exploited and there is a decline in wildlife which results in acute imbalance in ecological process. The life support system, it also may cause an irreparable damage to the ecosystem. So it may affect both physical and biological components of the environment. According to the estimation, India has lost nearly 200 species of wild animals and birds which have become extinct. And since then, the government of India has been making efforts for the protection and conservation of wildlife. So the government of India has established 165 game sanctuaries, 21 national parks, 13 biosphere reserves to protect the natural habitat and wild animals. Apart from this, Wildlife Conservation Week is celebrated in India, that is from October 7th every year. The National Wildlife Action Plan, it includes the strategy as well as a program for the conservation of wildlife. The first National Wildlife Action Plan in 1983, it has revised. The new Wildlife Action Plan 2002 to 2016 has been adopted. The Wildlife Protection Act 1972, it is adopted by all the states except Jammu and Kashmir, which governs the wildlife conservation and protection of endangered species. Wildlife Protection Act 1972. This act came into effect in 1972 and this was enacted to maintain ecological process and life supporting systems to preserve the biodiversity and also to ensure a continuous use of spaces, that is protection and conservation of wildlife. The major provisions of this act are strengthening management and protection of infrastructure of national parks and sanctuaries. The government may also appoint a central government and state government officers to implement the provisions of the act. From the central government, a Director of Wildlife Preservation and Assistant Director of Wildlife Preservation, and from the state government, a Chief Wildlife Warden and Wildlife Wardens. Protection of wildlife from threats of poaching and illegal trade in wildlife products. So it prohibits hunting of endangered species. It bans trade or commerce in scheduled animals. There is a provision for trade and commerce in some wildlife species with license for sale, possession, transfer, etc. Special care should be taken and captive breeding programs for highly endangered species of wildlife protection and to some endangered plants like bidome, cyad, blue vanda, etc. Research and development. The Act defines that the wildlife related terminology and it provides a comprehensive list of endangered wildlife species. Development of selected ex situ conservation areas like zoological and botanical gardens. Here are some conservation measures that should be taken at national and state levels to conserve the wildlife. Develop general awareness and concern for protection of wildlife, and also to ban the practice of hunting and capturing wildlife. Restrict the export and import of wildlife products. Gather information on the number and condition of wildlife and make special arrangements to protect the species whose number is limited. Protect them from pollution and other damages. Mark the areas of natural habitat of wildlife and protect their habitat by conserving forest. Cruelty to animals. Since man has emerged on the earth, animals has been his companion. Animals provided life support, they provided him food to eat, clothes to cover his body, bones to make his shelter and weapons. And they served him as a beast of burdens. As civilization advanced, man has learned the art of cultivation and to make the cloths, and his dependence on animal was reduced to some extent, but it continued to exploit the animals in different way for his own benefit. Animals are treated cruelly for the following reasons. First, for commercial purpose. Millions of animals are being killed annually for the purpose of the skin, fur, ivory, horns and other parts. The mass killing of birds and animals for commercial purpose, it had led to the extinction of some species, like the passenger pigeon. The passenger pigeon, it was killed because of their meat was so good to eat and their feathers could be used to make comfortable pillows. Similarly, blue whale, the world's largest animal, it was being hunted to near extinction of its oil, meat and bones. Illegal trade in animals. The illegal world trade in a rare and endangered species of birds and animals, it is estimated to be about $8 billion per year, and most of the poachers in the developing countries, they are poor and illiterate to depend on this trade for their livelihood. It has been estimated that on an average, for each and every animal they capture, they kill 50 other animals. For entertainment, a number of animals like elephants, lions, bears, horses, dogs, cats, etc. they are trained to perform in circus, TV shows, on the streets, etc. During their training period, they are chained, whipped and tortured to perform and act as per the wishes of their masters. For experimentation, the severest form of cruelty it is inflicted on the animals when they are captured and they are kept in laboratories for testing new medicines, cosmetics, etc. All the new medicines and cosmetics are first tested on poor animals who are made to suffer the pain and side effects of this test. For domestic needs, some of the animals like bulls, oxen, horses, etc. they have to perform various duties for their masters. Bulls, horses and camels, they are used in carts to carry people and the load. Oxen and camels, they are utilized to plow the fields, and donkeys, mules and elephant act as a beast of burden. PETA, it is abbreviated as People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and it is the world's largest organization which is engaged in preventing cruelty to animals. It was established in 1980 and it has done commendable work in protecting the rights of animals and saving them from cruelty. This organization, it opposes the use of animals for food, clothes, experiments or even for entertainment. PETA, it tries to prevent the cruelty to animals by organizing seminars, talks, awareness programs, marches, etc. The Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. In order to prevent cruelty to animals, the Government of India passed the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. The main objectives of this act are to prevent infliction of necessary pain or suffering on animals, to take reasonable measures to ensure the well-being of animals, to promote the welfare and protection of animals, to establish the Animal Welfare Board with a chairman, secretary and other members. Functions of Animal Welfare Board: to prevent unnecessary pain or suffering to animals, especially when they are being transported from one place to another, or when they are used, or when they are kept in a captivity or confinement. To construct sheds, water trucks and to provide veterinary assistance to animals. To ensure that unnecessary pain or suffering is eliminated in the pre-slaughter stages as far as possible. To encourage the formation of sanctuaries where animals and birds may find a shelter when they have become old or when they need protection. Cruelty to animals. According to this act, animals are treated cruelly if a person inflicts physical harm to them by beating, kicking, overriding, overloading, etc. Employs an animal in any work when it is unfit to be so employed due to illness. Abandons an animal when it is injured or ill. Mutilates or kills an animal cruelly. Kills an animal in sport and confines an animal in an ill-fitted cage which restricts its reasonable movement. Experimentation on animals. Experiments on animals, it is permitted for the purpose of new discovery of physiological knowledge or knowledge which will be useful for saving or prolonging life or alleviating suffering for combating any disease, whether of human beings, animals or plant. The central government may also appoint a committee to control and supervise such experiments. Performing animals. According to this act, no person can exhibit or train any performing animal unless he is registered in accordance with the provision of this act. The central government may also specify an animal which shall not be exhibited or trained as performing animal. CITES. It is abbreviated as the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. It is an international agreement between the governments. So its aim is to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants, it does not threaten their survival. CITES, it was drafted as a result of resolution which was adopted in 1963 at a meeting of members of IUCN, the World Conservation Union. It came into force on July 1st, 1975. CITES, it is an international agreement where the countries come and join voluntarily. Countries agreed to be bound by the convention are known as parties, and CITES is legally binding on the parties. It does not take the place of national laws. Fundamental principle of CITES. Roughly around 5,000 species of animals and 28,000 species of plants are protected by the CITES against overexploitation through the international trade. They are listed in 3 CITES appendices. Appendix 1. This includes species threatened with extinction which may be affected by the trade. Appendix 2. It includes all the species which are not threatened with extinction. Appendix 3. It includes any special species for the purpose of preventing or restricting exploitation. Regulations of the trade. The export or import of any specimen of a species, they include Appendix 1, 2 and 3, and it should require a prior permission, and that permission shall be granted under the following conditions. Such export or import will not be detrimental to the survival of that species. The specimen is not obtained in contravention of the laws of that particular state. The living specimen will be so prepared and it should be shipped as to minimize the risk of injury, damage or health or cruel treatment. An import permit has been granted for the specimen. That's all for the session. Thank you.